What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Security Squawk podcast. I'm your co-host, Bryan Hornung, here with Reginald Andre, Randy Bryan, and Ryan O'Hara. Ooh, can't talk to that. What's up, guys? How's everybody doing?
Trying to warm up a little bit. It's been cold here.
Oh, man, I know the feeling.
Cold in Texas, too. It's probably 80 in Florida, but...
Yep, just a little rain in the background, but it's still sunny.
So, Randy, I was talking to somebody 2 weeks ago, and they said they were from Texas. And I got to believe them since they're from Texas, but I don't recall this. Maybe you can confirm or deny quickly. This guy claims that last year in Texas, when it got really cold there, it was below zero. Is that right?
That I cannot deny or confirm because I know it was below freezing.
That's what I said. I said below freezing or below zero. And he was like below zero.
Freezing in every single county. It didn't get below zero here where we live, but it was
below 32 degrees, but not below
it was
zero.
I think where we were, it was 15.
That's what I asked him. I was like, below zero, like Celsius? And he was like, no. And I was like, no, it didn't get that cold.
No, maybe like up in the panhandle,
uh-huh.
Which goes pretty far up
he
there.
Said it was below zero for like over a week. And I was
not everywhere.
I was like, it was below freezing for a week, but not below zero.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting cold here in the U.S. Big, not that we're a weather show or anything, but big vortex coming down and freezing out everybody. I think the only warm spots are like Southern California and Florida. So Andre has no clue what we're talking about right now. He's there in his sunshine and his short sleeve shirt.
There you go.
And the thing with Florida, it's hotter than it sounds because we had 105 like over and over all summer long here. I go out to Florida. It's like a few weeks ago. It's 85 freaking degrees. 85. You'd think, oh, that feels great. I stepped out in the sun. I thought I was going to melt, man.
It was 91 when I was there a week later.
Mm-hmm.
We had 91 for like 3 or 4 days in a row. It was great. It was great, but my body wasn't used to that. So by 3 o'clock, I'm like ready for bed. So, all right, guys, we got a good show today. We're going to do a quick update on the Jackson County ransomware attack and where they're at with that. Plus, we have some updated information on something that we covered a while back around MediBank, which is, I think, that Australian group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then Forefront Dermatology is been recently hit with what they have to pay as a result of a settlement because of a data breach. We're going to jump into that today because that's a big deal, and it goes along with a lot of what we talk about on this show, which is the aftermath of these attacks and the time it takes for these things to kind of happen. We're trying to make sure that people understand that these ransomware events are not like quick one and done type things. Like you get in, you get the malware, you pay the ransom, you move on with life. We're trying to educate everyone and make them see that that's not the case. So we're going to use that one and one for a medical billing firm who kind of went under the radar a little bit of what happened to them this year in 2022 and the fallout of that. And then 2 quick updates on, CMMC. So if you're a government contractor, somebody who deals with the government, has contracts, CMMC is going to impact you. It probably already is in some way. You currently are under regulations, but it's only self-reporting right now. It looks like CMMC might be heading in that direction too. So we got a little bit of an update for everyone regarding CMMC. And then if you own a business in the United States, we just want to update everyone kind of what we talked about a few weeks ago with the FTC Safeguard rules that are in place. There are lots of cybersecurity rules that are being put in place by the FTC, and we're going to update you on a couple of things there. And then just, prepare yourself for the holidays. We have a little update towards the end on how to protect yourself during the holidays and what scammers and hackers are going to be trying to do to you over the holidays and how you can do things to protect yourself. So without further ado, who wants to do the fee?
I'll do the fee.
Yeah, right.
The fee is nothing except for your help in spreading the word. Part of the reason that we do this, probably the main reason we do this, is to spread awareness with people so that they understand that the things that we're seeing on a daily basis are actually happening. It's too easy for people to not talk about this type of stuff and pretend it's not happening and not think that it matters to them. But we see this on a daily basis where business owners go through this type of thing, and it is not fun. So we're trying to spread awareness to people. So share this podcast, subscribe, do anything that you can to get this information out, because you could be helping a business owner protect themselves so they don't have to go through this pain.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Yep. Share the show. Help us out. We won't annoy you and bother you for money. That's simple. So quick update here, guys. We tend to on the show talk about these attacks, and then we don't ever revisit them. Just to give everybody a quick update, what's going on in Jackson County, and then an update on the MediBank situation out in Australia, which we covered pretty extensively on the show because we thought it was a pretty big deal. And it is a big deal. So what's going on over in Jackson County, right? You got an update for us?
So they provided a little bit of an update that had a little bit more information, kind of a lot of the stuff that we were speculating on, like the next day. They ultimately ended up being closed for 3 days, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, reopening last Thursday. But since then, kind of the news on the subject has gone dark, whether that has to do with the fact that it's just not a sexy story anymore, so the news outlets aren't picking up on it, or the lawyers have taken control and are locking things down, and we're going to have to wait kind of to see how things play out for them before we get any more information. But ultimately, they were down 3 days heading into the Thanksgiving break. So now, if that school district is anything like the one by me, we're getting into a period of time off and half days, and so I don't know how much work the students are going to be able to get in from that Thursday, Friday last week through this week. So I mean, the timing of this was really unfortunate, and it's something that we see with a lot of these school breaches is it's happening either right before they're coming back into session or right before they're going into a break, and that can be very disruptive. So we'll have to see how it all ends up playing out, but it was bad enough that they were down for 3 days. Likely they're still operating on a limited basis, even though they were able to open last Thursday. So we just kind of have to wait and see at this point and see how things develop.
Yeah, I agree. They probably spent the 3 days trying to figure out how they're going to operate, until they get things back to quote unquote normal, which is, indicative of a company that doesn't have, or an organization that doesn't have a good incident response plan. And they kind of needed to do it on the fly. Well,
they probably needed that time to really do the forensics and even get started on the point of recovering. So they got to gather that data in order to have it, and then start the recovery from there.
Yeah. Are we in a place now where parents don't care? Like, I don't know, parents, or if it's the right term, or taxpayers would be more of a proper term. Assuming, I just assume everybody does it like we do here in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. It's 2 states I lived in, but most of the schools are funded through property taxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
No matter how you skin it, most states charge taxes in some way to pay for school, whether it comes through property, income, gases, who knows? But I mean, that's my thing. Like, when do parents? I mean, somebody's going to have to deal with this. Not let alone, like, I imagine that most parents in these districts work, right? They got to go to work, right? So who's taking off of work?
The 2 things that parents are going to push back on in a situation like this are, one, the time that the school was closed and them having to scramble to deal with that, and 2, taxes going up because having to recover from this type of stuff, having to do the forensics, having to involve a cybersecurity agency to come in and do all of this stuff isn't cheap. So those are the 2 things that are really going to impact them. Unfortunately, I think some of the things that they don't consider are, what data was taken and how that data can be used and how it might affect their children as they go on through life. And, it's just one of those things where they don't know enough about what can be done. That's why, like we said, share the show to help people out. They don't understand what the impact of that is. So they only think about those immediate things that are impacted. Their day, their schedule, and the amount of taxes coming out when they pay.
And I guarantee you, the next school board meeting, you're not even going to have 5 parents there to do the commentary, saying, "Hey, this is ridiculous. What are you guys going to do about this?" Because they just don't care.
And when the schools, when they have the millage proposals and stuff like that, that's not going to be their selling point. Hey, we need to raise the millage rate because we got preached. They're going to raise the millage rate, and they're going to sell it on, we need to do all these improvements, and they're going to bury the fact that they couldn't do those improvements because they just had to spend a couple $100,000 on incident response because they got hacked because they didn't have good policies.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I feel bad for any county or any school district that gets hacked, and the repercussions or the reverberations from these types of things. Like, how do if you're 2 parents, I have 2 full-time jobs, I own my own business, I have the flexibility that I can, if things are going okay here at the business, usually I can pull myself away from it whenever I want.
Bring your kids to the office and put them to work.
Well, that too. I just put them to work. I just start deploying ransomware to everybody. But that's I have that flexibility. I can't put myself in the shoes of 2 parents or a single parent that now has to take personal time. And what if you only have a week or 2 weeks available, and now you got to do it because your school got hit with ransomware? So that's why they have to open back up after 3 days, in my opinion. If this was a business that wasn't under that kind of pressure, you might see them down a little bit longer, and they probably are down. They're probably not,
They're probably a glorified daycare at this point because they're not able to get a lot of the stuff done that they need to get done. But to your point, they had to open because otherwise the parents were going to go crazy.
Yeah, 100%. So
introducing the kids to books right now. This is a book.
This is what we call paper.
So, and then we got MediBank, and this is just getting wild. How brazen? I mean, I guess it's hard for me to wrap my head around that we are dealing with real hardened criminals here, like, at the same level. Maybe sometimes we, in our minds, minimize cyber crime versus murder, like they're not, one's way worse than the other. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I mean, this is an ever evolving new type of crime. And when you start seeing these thugs be as brazen as they are now with this MediBank stuff. So MediBank was breached. It was a big medical records company out in Australia, and they were breached, and hackers started releasing medical information in order to hope to get paid. And now the hackers are releasing more information. So that's what's going on here. That's kind of the high level update. What else do we know about what's going on at MediBank? Because it was a pretty sensitive information that was released on people, which is pretty disgusting, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think about it, but
just think about the largest hospital in your city, and now their data is now being released to the open. This is happening over there, the largest hospital in the country. So now the hacker, so they got ransomware. They didn't want to pay it, and there's some interesting things about that. So now the hackers are now sharing their 5th set of files, and this time they're including HIV records, hepatitis, mental illnesses. So this is like really, sensitive information that they're putting the pressure for them to pay this $15 million ransom. But what's interesting is that these executives just got a $7.3 million bonus last week at a shareholders meeting, but they didn't want to pay the $15 million ransom.
Mm-hmm.
It's stuff like this that gets the government and more involved in things like this, because we're looking at almost 10 million records have potentially been breached. They're releasing samples, like Andre's saying, trying to get paid, a $15 million ransom. And then what? Now they're getting bonuses. What are they getting bonuses for?
Right.
And this is the kind of stuff that gets government involved.
Is it the kind of stuff that guarantees government will get?
Yes.
Right.
State's attorney, well, I mean, whatever their equivalent is of local, officials that work at the federal level in terms of law enforcement, that's going to get them involved in this. And then it's going to get ugly.
Well, and the level of negligence here, I think, is really, really high. The amount of data that they were able to get in a single compromise, there's some real big access control issues going on. And so, you mentioned the bad guys and how could they do this to people. And I 100% agree with that. But at some point, you have to stop looking at it that way and start looking at it like, the outrage really should be with this company for letting this happen. The way I look at it, this would be no different than, say, a car dealership deciding to store all of the keys inside of the cars unlocked during the
Would you
not there, right?
Would you feel differently if this was a quote unquote sophisticated attack? Like, would you feel differently if the company was actually doing everything?
If they were doing, then somebody else has a huge vulnerability that had access to everything. I mean, the vast amount of data that they were able to get, and we talked a little bit about this last week. Either they have some really terrible access controls, or there was the mother of all vulnerabilities in this system that gave them, God level access to all of this stuff.
Right.
But that to me is the biggest concern. Like if they had just gotten, a certain subset of records, that's one thing. You're doing your due diligence. Yes, there are certain things you can't control, and nobody in this room is going to tell anybody that they can stop 100% of hacks. It's just the vast amount of data that was obtained in this case. That's the thing that's really outrageous to me.
Yep, I agree. Randy, any thoughts?
It's frustrating, but It is what it is.
I feel you. So along the same lines, this happened to a company back in 2021. And I would venture to say that when we mention, the name Forefront Dermatology, it probably doesn't ring too many bells with people thinking that this particular company was one of the largest breaches in 2021. Because at the time, it probably didn't seem like it was. And then as time passed and people started to look at things from a forensic standpoint and really understand what was impacted by this breach, here we are today, fast forward almost a year and a half later, and this company is now paying a $3.75 million settlement to settle a class action lawsuit, which I probably said the word class action lawsuit more in the last 6 months than I ever said on this show, because that's what we're seeing now. And that's what I keep trying to educate businesses on is it's not about the event. It's not about the ransomware. It's not about, paying the ransom to a group of cyber criminals. The damage is going to come. And what I see as what I call dying a slow death is defending lawsuits and defending class action lawsuits when your data gets out there as a result of your poor cybersecurity practices. And in my opinion, based on other cases that I'm aware of that are settled now, these attorneys are getting very good at getting to a settlement.
But is that settlement having any impact though? So looking at this particular story, so it was 3.75 million with an M, not billion, right. Million. And the breach was one of the largest of 2021, impacting more than 2.4 million individuals. So if they've got 2.4 million that were impacted, presumably they have a few more than that total as far as client base. 3.75 million doesn't seem like that much overall. And then when you look at what the class members were getting, your typical credit monitoring, it says up to $10,000 in reimbursement for documented losses. So they have to prove that there was money lost here, not just that information got out. And then up to 5 hours of lost time at a rate of $25 per hour. So, I mean, the people basically got nothing. The The attorney probably got a fair percentage of that. That's probably the only winner in this situation. The dermatology center, which was the one that got hit with the breach, had a fine that may or may not have cost less than had they implemented proper procedures going in this, which is why things don't seem to change, right? If the fines cost less than actually doing the right thing, nobody ever learns anything. It's the cost of doing business, and you move on.
Go ahead.
These are ambulance chaser type operations with these attorneys, and the point is, and what I'm trying to say to people is, it's not going to be about the ransomware. It's going to be about the attorney who contacts you and says he's filing a class action lawsuit on the behalf of, so many hundred thousands, what have you, people, and you have to defend it. Like, just because you're in business and this is happening, you now have to defend it. And, in most of these cases, I don't even see them getting even close to trial, right? Because these attorneys are, during discovery, asking the right questions and saying, show us this, show us that, show us proof that you were doing this. And then the lawsuit alleged that the Forefront had inadequate data security controls and failed to employ appropriate measures to protect patient data, which is exactly what Ryan pointed out with MediBank in the last, topic that we talked about. And that's where we're at with this one. So these guys are having to deal with this. I mean, do you think most businesses even, that would be my question. Do you guys think most businesses can absorb a $4 million settlement? Like, I don't think
that's another reason why stories like this are dangerous, though, because people think, oh, hey, it's a fine and I move on, but that doesn't work for your average small business.
No.
And probably this business can handle it because it's a pretty big doctor's firm. They probably have some kind of insurance. But once again, this is one of those messy, stupid things that ends up pushing it more to government and getting government more involved because, like Ryan said, the lawyers made out great and the criminals made out great. And basically that's it in this situation because $10,000, that barely gets a cybersecurity expert to cough in your general direction, and $25 an hour for 5 hours. Like, what are they going to hire? Like a college student with that kind of pay? I mean,
that's how all of these class action lawsuits are structured, right?
Exactly.
You get, like I told you when I got my thing in for the bank for the credit card fraud, it like literally told me I was allowed to bill like $7.50 an hour, and it was like up to like 2 or 3 hours was the most I could get, and it was like the most I would ever get out of it was like less than $25. So it's ridiculous because nobody's even going to waste their time filling this out, right? For $150 max.
Yep.
Right. And nobody's even, so the money is just going to be set aside and the lawyers will pillage, $3.59 million, and the rest will be left for the people named in the class action lawsuit. So it doesn't benefit the consumer in any way. But do you guys, I guess you don't agree with me. I don't think that Forefront Dermatology is going to be around. Like, I think this is enough of a hit where they're going to rebrand, merge. They're not going to exist as Forefront Dermatology.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, they're going to survive some way, but yeah,
right.
It just goes back to what costs more, a rebrand or doing things the right way.
Right.
Well, I did the math though. So they're a $280 million company.
Yeah.
They have to pay what, 3.75. If they had spent 4% on cybersecurity, that would have been 11 million. And if you scale this down to like your regular small business, they're looking at the same thing, right? Do I spend 11 million on cybersecurity, or do I take the risk? And if I get hit, I pay 3.75. So it's the same thing, but just you scale it down.
Yeah.
Which is why government's getting involved. I mean, you also can save like $5 by not putting airbags in cars, or $200 or whatever they cost, But that's
you got to imagine that there's got to be more. I mean, maybe I got to look into this a little bit deeper with this group, because this is just one aspect of this breach, which is one class action lawsuit. It doesn't preclude somebody else from filing on their own if they opted out of this. And that's a very easy win for somebody, being that there's a class action lawsuit settlement. It could also be other class action lawsuits brought against them for other things besides what this covered. But on top of that, there was a cleanup involved, right, for this. And, they had to fix whatever the problem was. That's also factored into costing them money. But I think based on what Andre said, my opinion is if you're a $280 million company, that's why you're settling for 3.75. And that's and this is why we need, as Randy said, government to step in and levy the fines and do the things and make this more painful for this company.
And to segue that into the stuff that we're going to be talking about here next, is that even going to be effective, though? Because what we keep seeing is, when they finally do get something down and they're going to start enforcing it, then it just keeps getting delayed and delayed and delayed. So are we even going to get to that point where it's serious enough where they're going to take action and actually, enforce that action?
Yeah, right. And this is the third largest HIPAA breach, and the fine was only $3.75 million.
Well, no, this is the settlement for
the settlement. Okay, got it.
I don't think HIPAA has levied anything yet.
Okay.
So, I think regulators are still poring over that to determine what that's going to look like, if anything at all.
Should we cough lobbyists right now?
Let's see if there's anything out there. But, Randy, you got anything you want to add to this?
No.
Nope.
So then, as Ryan
fill some time there, buddy.
as Ryan mentioned, you also have this medical billing or debt collection firm. Is that right? Do I have the right one?
It's PFC.
Yeah, PFC. So, and we're going to talk about this a little bit too, because it's kind of similar to the last two that we talked about. This all has to do with medical information. So number one, if you deal with medical information in any way, shape, or form, know that you're a target, right? Even if you come close to it, because a hacker doesn't know. He's gonna get in your network and see what you got. Maybe you come close to these areas, but you don't actually deal with private health information, or maybe you do. So, Randy, what's happening over here with PFC?
So PFC had a ransomware attack, and 1.91 million patients' records were probably affected. This is a debt collection company. So basically, your little local doctor's office, somebody doesn't pay a bill, and so they just send the bill to a debt collection company. PFC happens to be one of the largest debt collection companies. And what they do is they take the information from the bill, which they have to get that information. So they've got to know what the bill was about. They got to know who it deals with, probably a social security number so they can verify with the customer when they're on the phone with them, address, phone number, all that stuff. And then they start calling, emailing. I'm not sure exactly how, what PFC does, but basically they go after the customers to try to get some kind of settlement on the debt. And so the fact that they've had a ransomware, I mean, it's almost just as bad as the MediBank that we mentioned back at the beginning of the show, because you're talking names and addresses together with medical information of people together that when it's leaked out can be used for targeted attacks, blackmail, which, that's probably not going to happen, or could happen though. But really the targeted attacks, because when you're doing, like, let's say a business email compromise, if a bad actor's doing that, the more little pieces of information they have that they can put in that email they send out, the more likely you are to click on it. And, they could literally just send it out and pretend they're PFC and say, hey, we got a settlement. The doctor came back and said he'd be willing to give you 5%, on the dollar, or 10% on the dollar. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. And they log in enter in their information, and then poof, lots of money's taken out of their account. I mean, that's just one quick scenario off the top of my head.
And I think the MediBank stuff is really showing that they're going to look for any way they can possibly monetize this information. So it's not just going after that provider that was breached and ransoming them, and then ransoming them again because they exfilled the data and they'll leak it. But they're starting to go after the individuals where they have this. So in this case, the medical treatment is one of the pieces of data that they may or may not have obtained. So you could take that treatment and back that into, oh, hey, this person's got a drug problem, like we're seeing with MediBank. And now that not only can they go after the company that was breached, but they can go after that individual and say, hey, we'll send this information out to your employer. Do they know about this?
Yeah, and this is wild because, as we talked about in the last one, we kind of mentioned woeful or inadequate cybersecurity practices, but you look into this one a little bit, and this PFC chief executive, Michael Shoup, rightfully so, in my opinion, is not responding to emails from TechCrunch asking for information about its ransomware attack. Instead, the company's general counsel reiterated its boilerplate statement in an email, but declined to answer any specific questions, including why it took the company 4 months to notify affected healthcare providers and whether the stolen data was encrypted. It almost seems like these guys are going out of their way, which, if you're actually being investigated by law enforcement, you could look at this as like, trying to evade an investigation or interfere with an investigation, by doing kind of some of the stuff that they're doing in this article. And this is probably the second biggest medical records data breach in
not
history.
Too far behind the one we just talked about.
Yeah. And then and if I remember correctly, there was this the AMCA was another medical debt collector who did medical billing for LabCorp and Quest, and they're out of business. So they filed for bankruptcy after their data breach. So
right.
I say that a lot on these articles, like, hey, is this company going to be affected? Are they going to stay in business? Are they going to go? I mean, I don't see how these companies stay in business, unless they're wildly profitable with what they're selling and what they're doing, and they have all this extra cash on hand. I don't see how any business that's, mid-market or small business stays in business after a cyber attack anymore. I mean,
statistically, they don't. I think
it's a one-way ticket to going out of business.
Yeah. I think it's like 80% go under within 6 months. It's a very high number.
This is just wild, like how bad this is getting for businesses, and it's crazy to me that people just continue not to invest and not do things so they can protect themselves, and bury their head in the sand and think they have things covered when they probably really don't. Anything else you guys want to add on this one before we move on? Good.
Yep.
All right, so two quick updates, guys, for everybody. So if you run a business in any way, shape, or form, you're probably impacted by one of these two cybersecurity requirements that are being rolled out to businesses. And a lot of businesses don't realize that these things are happening right under their nose. So first one is CMMC, which is basically going to be the DoD's rules, regulations for doing business with the Department of Defense. If you want to contract with the Department of Defense or a prime subcontractor, you're going to have to follow CMMC. You're going to have to be in one of three levels, level 1, level 2, or level 3, depending on the scope of your contract, what kind of data you're entrusted with or you're dealing with, and how much money you're actually making. So a small business that's basically dealing with unclassified information is probably going to be a level 1 for a period of time, for a while. And then as you increase your contract dollar amounts, or you're dealing with more sensitive information, you might have to be a level 2 or a level 3. If you're dealing with top secret information, if you're dealing with any kind of weapon systems or anything like that for the DoD, you're automatically going to be a level 3. So that's just kind of that in a nutshell. But the big update for CMMC is essentially that everything's being kicked down the road again. They're delaying things by another 6 months. There was a symposium or a get together in Washington last week where they talked about a lot of these things, and it's just getting kicked down the road where businesses aren't going to have to do anything yet with CMMC. And as of right now, the guidance is that any language about CMMC in any government contracts does not have to be followed. So my personal opinion, guys, is I've been skeptical about this CMMC since it was rolled out, and I've probably said it on the show. I lived through NMCI with the Navy when they tried to kind of create managed services for the Navy, because everything was kind of like a patchwork system that different offices, different places built their own networks, and they wanted to make one big network, and they thought they could do it in a couple of years, and it took like 10, probably 15 years before it was fully realized, and probably not even fully realized today to what they thought it was going to be in the beginning. And I just think that it's going to be the same thing with CMMC. Like, there's just too many things that are variable and different between big contractors, small businesses, and they're just not going to be able to come to an agreement on what this needs to look like so it's fair for everybody. Your current requirement is NIST number 1. You need to follow that today, but you only have to self-report. Self-report doesn't mean lie, doesn't mean make shit up. It means do an evaluation and report your score. But a lot of these people don't take this seriously, and they report these ridiculous scores that they would never achieve, even if they were doing it the right way. Mm-hmm. And they're just going in saying our score is like really high and we're doing cybersecurity really good, and that's what they have to do. And that's what level 1's really forming out to be, that you're just going to self-attest that you're doing these things and you're not going to have to be audited. And that's kind of the update, is that you're basically going to kick the can down the road for 6 months, and they're going to revisit this in the spring, and they're going to decide whether it's ready for adoption then. But based on the timeline right now, the earliest you're going to see language, or the earliest you're going to have to adhere to anything regarding CMMC, is in 2024. That's going to be the earliest. So you got all of this year, and you basically got all of next year, where you don't have to do anything, and you probably won't, even though the recommendation was, hey, don't wait, start doing this stuff.
Right. So what's going to be the catalyst that finally gets this over the finish line? Unfortunately, looking at the writing on the wall, it's going to be a major contractor getting hit, and military secrets getting out into the open.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's 110 security controls inside of NIST 800-171 that these companies need to be doing today. Now, like I said, some of them choose to do it the right way, and some of them choose just to say, oh, I'm just going to go in and report my score, and then
I think there's probably a subset in the middle too that just doesn't understand what they need to do, and they may have good intentions, but they're not doing it the right way just because they're not hiring the right people to implement it as well.
Yeah, it's just it's at the end of the day that the government wants you to make cybersecurity a way of life, a part of your business, and that's kind of what we're going to roll into here next with the FTC. So that's kind of the CMMC update. If you have government contracts, which probably isn't a large percentage of the people out there, but the FTC rule affects a large percentage of businesses out there. And we read through the list of companies. Basically, if you accept credit, or if you contractors don't think that they have, cybersecurity requirements. Guys that, build houses, right? But a lot of the contractors that we deal with, they get paid because they're getting loans through some company to get that work done. And
many of them have financing relationships. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And they're collecting that information. Now, depending on how they handle it, the recommendation is that you minimize the amount of data that you store where you can, where it's legally appropriate. So, for instance, I have a contractor who only does paper applications. Then he has a person go to a website and input that information into the system, hit submit. It's a secure website provided by the bank or the lender. That information goes in the system. When the decision comes back from the bank, that paper is then destroyed. It's shredded, right? So they are not storing any information on their systems. And that's kind of how they're keeping things, quote unquote, secure in their business. But not everybody operates that way, right? Some people are scanning that thing in. Some people are, sending out Google Docs saying, give us all your information.
And not everybody, even when they're supposed to operate that way, operates that way. I mean, how many times have any of us seen a situation where, hey, you go in, nope, all of our credit applications are done through this online system, and we just put them right in there. And then when we do our assessment, we find that, oh, well, this particular rep is entering all this information into a spreadsheet and then entering them into that website at the end of the day. So all of that stuff is still just sitting in a file unencrypted on that machine. So
it's amazing to me how many companies think they have things like a process that's hard and true. And then we go in and we do an assessment and we find out that
having a process is great, but you also need to have a process to make sure that that process is being done.
Right. Yep. Right. And that's amazing to me how many times we go into a company and be like, hey, we found, this information on this person's laptop. And they think, well, we only have stuff in, our system, in our Salesforce, in our server. And, you find it in other places all the time.
Yeah. You go work for a hotel and they have to scan the guest's ID. But it turns out and it's web-based. But it turns out that although it's web-based, it still stores a local copy of that driver license on the computer. And they had about 900 driver licenses on the local C drive.
So just so everybody understands, like the FTC puts in these rules and they put out these safeguard rules, and it allows the state attorney generals who work, and then it also allows the Department of Justice to work with state attorney generals to enforce these rules. And that's kind of how this works. So if you're going to get charged by somebody for this, number one, it's probably going to be post-breach, that they're going to go in and they're going to look at what you were doing. And, they're not going to proactively go in and make sure you're doing cybersecurity the right way, right? I don't think anybody envisions, that. But, when you do report a data breach, you're going to have people come in and, look at what you're doing. It could be law enforcement, and then there could potentially charge you, with violating these rules. And why we wanted to bring this up and what the update is, on the 15th of November this year, they announced that they were kicking the can down the road as well and extending these safeguard rules, or certain portions of them, by 6 months. So you guys want to talk about kind of what specific rules were kicked down the road that businesses now have a deadline moved from December 9th to now June 9th of 2023 to do, I don't know what, certain things that need to be in their business. Let's kind of go through it. I feel like this is like very, very basic. Like,
some of them are going to take a little bit of legwork. And I think to me, this is more a failure of getting the information out than it is the information itself. Like, how many people have we talked to that this would adhere to had no idea that this was even a thing? Like, so they have no real effective way of getting this information to the people that are going to have to adhere to it. So that's why, it starts getting close to the deadline. Everybody's like, whoa, we just found out about this last week. How are we supposed to do this? But some of the stuff that's on here, like, you could implement it today with minimal impact to your business. You're going to have some people who get confused because they've never heard of MFA before, but like MFA is something you could turn on today. And you may have 24, 48 hours of a couple people confused and you walk them through it, but then you're good.
So I got a question for you. First bullet point. It's worded very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
It says designate a qualified individual to oversee their information security program. That's very subjective.
It is, but it has to be in writing is the thing. So I think that's the big kicker here. You can't just say, oh, I have an IT guy and I designate that person. I mean, this needs to be in writing. That's something that's big different from, that's a big change with these safeguard rules.
Well, and the thing that I'm not clear on with that bullet point and the way that it's worded, so there's two criteria in the FTC Safeguards updates. It's one, you have to designate somebody to be the one who's implementing these things. But two, you have to specifically have somebody internal who is aware of those things. So, it could be the same person, but if you choose to do a third party, which most of these companies probably should, then you still need an internal resource. And I'm not clear on if this bullet point covers one or both of those. I mean, I get it. If you haven't started the process of evaluating third-party providers to do cybersecurity, that's a big deal. I mean, it's a lot more involved than hiring somebody to fix your computer. You're hiring somebody that you're going to trust with the security. The thing that scares me is if this is more, to keep them, allow them a longer period of time to not have that internal responsible party. I mean, that's something I think could be done today. You need to have somebody who is aware that this is a thing and who's responsible if you have a breach.
So for small businesses, do you read that first bullet point as you need to hire somebody to consult with you on cybersecurity? Or do you read that as,
well,
what do you guys read that as? Because
it's just trying to sum it all up. I mean, we ultimately would go back to the FTC. Actually, literally have to go back to the law.
Mm-hmm.
But the FTC has published a couple of articles. Like there's one that's called "What the FTC Safeguard Rules Mean to Your Small Business." It kind of goes through all of this. So I think ultimately the person reading this would have to go back to either that article or back to the law itself.
And I think the way that the law is worded, it's you need to have somebody. If you do choose a third party, you still need to have a second person who's responsible. So it kind of combines both of those things into the two. So when I first started reading that, I was like, yeah, it sounds like they're really kicking something easy down the court.
The crazy thing is the report has to also go to a C-level person, though, correct?
Right. Yes.
You can't that's the
caveat.
That on-site person.
If you choose a third party, you still need to have an internal person who's responsible for this. And so that's the key. I think if they broke that out into, where they said, okay, we'll give you, 6 months down the road to choose that third party resource, but you still need to have a designated internal resource. You can choose them today that ultimately has the responsibility to be aware that this is the thing and that your company is responsible for it. Because that's what we've been seeing is, they kind of put their heads in the sand and then, we'll, blame the IT company for not explaining that they needed cybersecurity. The insurance company kind of doing the same thing. I think it would have been nice to see them at least still require that internal resource that is the cybersecurity point person to, limit them from being able to put their heads in the sand and said, well, I didn't know any better. I get having a little extra time to choose a third-party cybersecurity firm because that's a big deal. But having somebody at least internally that now knows that that's their responsibility and they've got 6 months to find somebody, I think would have gone a long way to giving this a little bit more teeth and not just been we're probably indefinitely going to keep pushing this down the road.
Right.
So here's what I would say. I'm going to read off a bunch of other things that you got to do by June 9th as part of this. And again, if your business deals with money type transactions in any way, you take credit card information, it's not just bank account information or running loans and credit. If you take credit cards and you deal with people's personal information, you need to do this stuff. And if you have a breach, if this is an after the fact type of stuff, you're going to get slapped down pretty hard and probably fined or potentially charged if you don't have these things in place. So develop a written risk assessment. Easier said than done. Limit and monitor who can access customer information. Easier said than done, especially most small businesses that I'm familiar with. Encrypt information in transit at rest. Potentially, moderately easy to maybe difficult, depending on what you got going on. Train security personnel. I have no idea why they say security personnel. It should be trained employees, period. Develop a written incident response plan. Okay. If you don't have a written risk assessment, you probably don't have an incident response plan. Implement multi-factor authentication whenever anyone accesses customer information. So these are all stuff that, like Rye said, you can get some of this stuff done quickly. You can get some of this stuff's going to take a little bit of time. But when you read all these things and you put them all together, I don't like most business owners I know aren't going to know what half of this stuff means.
Yep.
Right. So in your mind, you either got to wrap your head around what all this means, which means you're, watching YouTube for the next 6 months, or you're going to hire somebody to do this.
Right.
Right. So I guess the easiest way we can start talking to people about the FTC stuff is you need to hire somebody who knows what they're doing to help you out with this stuff.
Yep.
And that's the bottom line. So,
but to, my point, if they would have at least said you have to choose somebody internally, then that internal person now has the responsibility to use that next 6 months to hire that company or that third party personnel.
100%.
Right now, it's like now you don't have to do anything for 6 months, and that's another excuse in 6 months to push.
Well, I think bullet points where it says designate that person, and then it says train that person. Right. So that might be just train that person on what your GRC is. What are you responsible for? And then go find somebody that can help us, be compliant or, do the things we need to do. But yeah, in most companies, it's just going to be the CEO. If you're a 10-person company or less, the CEO is going to have to own this. You can't just give it to somebody else and hope for the best, because you're the one who's going to be getting the reports, right? All right, guys. So we got the holidays upon us, and we know that the holidays are that time of year where everybody gets some kind of a phishing email around something that has to do with a holiday deal, what have you. You go from Halloween right into New Year's, so you have almost 3 months to use this time of year for various holidays, and who doesn't like a good deal, right? IDs are going to be cheap this year, so I'm probably going to buy me a new TV.
And a lot of the legitimate deals look just like the fake ones that we're telling people.
If you want to push me, send me an email that I want a free 85-inch TV, and I might click on it. But that's it. That's what's going on this holiday season. We kind of want to remind everybody that be careful on what you click on, be careful on what you open, because we are seeing things like this phishing kit that impersonates well-known brands that target U.S. shoppers. Andre, what's going on here?
Actually, skip me on that one, please.
No. He's doing Randy, what's going on here?
Well, it basically kind of goes back to the whole ransomware as a service type thing. So I guess you could call this crime as a service or phishing as a service, FOSS, if you will. But basically, it's a kit that the bad guys can buy, and that, we assume that, then that is used to target people with specific ads or links looking like they can buy things. The crazy thing about it is it uses a unique URL for every single person, which if you click on it, and even if your security software stops it, they instantly know you're real.
It's not showing.
And then 2, your security software probably isn't going to catch it because it's
Right.
not going to be recognized as a bad URL. So that's kind of the gist of it.
I mean, ultimately,
that old cat and mouse game. They figured this out. They figured out how to register URLs quickly and start using them. Go ahead, Ryan.
The advice for this is no different than what it is at any other time of the year. It's just you're going to see it a lot more. Don't trust anything that's sent to you unsolicited. Whether it's a phone call, a text message, an email. If it's a deal that interests you, go to the website. Almost always the website is going to have that same deal where you can confirm that. And if it doesn't, then that's just bad hygiene on the person who's trying to put the deal out there. Call them on the phone and find out and make sure. But never trust anything that's sent to you. Always go out and get your confirm your information before you respond to anything.
If it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Usually is.
So they if it's salacious, there's probably something bad. They want to prey on your emotions. PREY, prey on your emotions and get you to click on something like, oh yeah, wow, I wanted a new backpack. Yeah, and look, I got an ad for one, and it's only $40. And
I think economics too. Like this year, the legitimate Black Friday deals that I've seen so far are a lot less appealing than we have seen in years past. With all of the inflation stuff that we've seen over the past couple of years, people are trying to recoup their costs. They haven't made as much as they have been in prior years. I think a lot of those Black Friday deals are not going to be as good as they have been in years past. So, those fake deals are going to stand out a little bit more because people are looking for ways to save money because just as the same way that's impacted the real retailers, it's impacted the average people. So they're looking for those big deals and they're drooling over some of these options, and then they're just falling right into the trap. So
when we were earlier, I clicked on a link because I want a free TV, and all I had to do was put in my credit card for free shipping for the shipping costs.
Yep.
So I got an 85-inch TV for $35.
Oh, this is true?
No.
Oh.
But these guys are getting good, man. I mean, outside of the fact that if the deal's too good to be true, it's probably fake if you clicked on it, right? But the bottom line is that these guys are getting very sophisticated with these phishing emails, making it harder for the security software that we put in place and for guys like us who are trying to do research to get to these pages. As Randy mentioned, if you don't have that token, present in the URL, you're not going to see the page. And that's basically how a security researcher is going to, try to figure out like what's going on here. And if they can't see this stuff, it makes it harder and harder. So again, cat and mouse game. These guys are getting a little bit ahead of us on this phishing stuff, unfortunately. So don't be a turkey. Stay safe out there.
There you go. You finally said it, man.
All right, guys. Thanks for your time. We'll see you in the next show. Take care, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, bye, y'all.